It was obvious to me that this morning, when I woke up, I bought the chapter right when it came out, and I was going through them. I knew people were going to explode over the fact that they're back in Edolas, and the fact that we are now seeing the, the fruits of 9 years have passed, because the difference between, obviously, the main fairy tale crew and their Edolas counterparts is, in real time, like, the fairy tale crew, for the most part, it's been 2 years and some change. Like, there's obviously, like, handfuls of days in between parts, weeks, and even a couple months. Like, for instance, obviously, the 3 months, for the training for the Grand Magic games, the main casting experience, because they were in the Celestial Spirit world. But for the most part, you can just sum it up into years, 9 years, because the seven from after Sirius Island, and then a year after Tartaros, and a year after Alvarez. So, for the most part, the main cast, it's been 2 years of their real time in just years. I'm not talking about, I mean, because even if you don't want to count the, no, you wouldn't count the 3 months in the Celestial Spirit world because they didn't experience it. For them, it's been 2 years, give or take a little bit of extra time since they were in Edolas, whereas the people of Edolas, they were 9 years, and then give or take however many days, weeks, months on top of that, since they have the arc and they lost magic in their world and everything. So I knew people were gonna go crazy about that, because not only is it interesting that they're in Edolas, but obviously, I mean, the thing that people were by far the most wanting to see is the fact that we have Edolas, Natsu, and Lucy over the 9 years they got married and had a kid, this little girl named Nasha. I like her. I like her design. I think she's like such a interesting little character. In the original drawing that Mishima did, she had, like, he said that the name was at the time, because he did him on the spot. It was like, I think Storm was the one for Gray's kid, and then Natsu's kid, it was like between Nashi and Luna, but it looks like Nasha is what Mishima went with. And in that original drawing, because he did it mostly on the spot of what he would imagine they'd be like, for Gray's kid, for the most part, he looks the same. The only difference is his name is like Grage or something, Grige, and Lucy Natsu's kid, instead has more of Lucy's face, where in the original picture that we saw as like kind of the concept art for her, she had more of Natsu's face. I like this, and I really like the scarf design. I think she's an interesting character. Like, this gives the good bright side that Natsu and Lucy's kid, like their version, I think looks better like this. I think she's cuter with Lucy's face and a little bit of Natsu's hair with like the way that it goes up. My favorite part of her design is definitely the scarf, because it's done like symmetrically, trailing behind her. I like it a lot. It actually reminds me a little bit of what Romeo had, except obviously his was tied in the front. I just thought that was cool. Like, remember how he looked when we first saw him in Sirius Island, and then right after Sirius Island through Grand Magic game stuff, before how he looked at Alvarez. But even though I really liked seeing progress for Edolas, because the most we really saw, otherwise there was a novel that just kind of like talked about a little bit of what they were doing, like learning how to like farm without magic and kind of do stuff. And that's like, it's cool to have that, but like I'm really intrigued at seeing this and like what we're going to be doing in Edolas, because they can't be in Edolas for too long. I don't think they could be in Edolas for too many chapters, because no magic means like they're not going to really get into any fights, and there's not going to be anything with the Dragon Eaters, and there's not going to be anything with the Dragon Gods. So I don't, it's not like there's going to be a long like arc within Edolas, like a rebound. I always wondered like if there could have been an arc in Edolas, and in my mind it was always like people go back and they figure out a way to kind of like bring magics into Edolas from Earthland, and then it's kind of like people with no magic versus people with magic, and it'd be kind of like that style, and it'd be like Living Under Tyranny kind of like style, way more aggressive, like dictatorship or something. But this is so far like just kind of peeking in, and the only other thing we really had that was an indicator they'd be here a little bit longer was the stuff about Urza Nightwalker. I'm interested in that, Also, like, Mystigun isn't king. It's been 9 years for them, and he's still prince. I wonder why he hasn't taken the spot. Maybe he doesn't kind of want to rule over as a king, and but they still call him prince. I don't know. I'm interested to see what's up with Urza Nightwalker. I don't imagine it's anything crazy. Like, I don't really know what it could be, but, like, I don't really know what it could, like, do for any large-scale story. Like, the only thing I could think of is if it was, like, something that would completely throw Urza off. Like, if Nightwalker, like, became super muscular because she wanted to keep being strong, or she has like 10 kids or something, and it's just kind of like surprising to Urza, and you could do some comedy with like Mystogun and Urza Nightwalker. But, like, other than that, like, I don't really know what the large scale plan would be for what to do there. I also like that they're still calling him Mystogun and not Jalal. He's just Mystogun. I think that's cooler, and it's easier to differentiate them, just because like the difference between the other characters is like we knew them as Edolas versions, whereas we knew Edolas Jalal as Mystogun, and people still refer to him as Mystogun. So that stuff was obviously very interesting, just seeing like the characters come back. But like for me, even though I really like seeing like the designs for Edo, Lucy, and Natsu's kids, as well as Edolas, Gray, and Juvia's kids, I really want to see how the characters react to that when they leave, and like what does this do for like their mindset in a larger scale. Because Mishima did say a while ago, this is like a year and some change ago, he said that he was like ready for the ships pretty much, I think he said to pretty much just go through. So like we already have had a lot of progress. I think that's something that we've already had. The only one that hasn't had like large steps forward is Natsu and Lucy, but we have seen bits that show clear indications that Mishima is building up for it, like when Natsu got jealous of people flirting with Lucy right before the Alderaan business happened. But like Gray has fully acknowledged like his feelings for Juvia. He's admitted it. We know that he's just waiting to feel like he's strong enough in order to protect her in the case of needing to do so because of the fight with Invil. We just had Jalal move past all the stuff he did, put it behind him, and try and live moving forward. And obviously that moment between him and Urza a couple chapters ago, Gray and not Gray, Gajil and Levi obviously are gonna have kids soon. So it's nice in that aspect for seeing this, because I think that there are bits that from this that will help progress like Natsu and Lucy, but also it'll be just nice for character interactions just to see what this does to them. But for the most part, I have a couple of theories to where this could lead to, and I think while they're in Edolas, it's going to be an information dump chapters. Like we'll probably get, my guess is 2 to 3 chapters more in Edolas before we get back to Selene and everything. So with that, it's like, well, what could they be doing? Because I don't think it'll just be like, hey, we're in Edolas, we're going to do fun stuff. I think it's going to be for getting vital information to lead us into what's going on. And I think that I believe I've figured out a couple things. I'm going to go over it when I get to the chapter, because I don't want to just kind of like skip over other stuff that happened and get right to my theory. But yeah, so like it starts out, we have the White Witch wake up, and again, I wish we would just have somebody give her a name. Nickname would be just as good for me than like a straight up name. But like she ends up waking up, she goes to white out Max and Warren and couldn't. Like, so I'm wondering if that was a borrowed ability from Selene, because we know that Selene had something to do with her losing control over the Fairy Tail Guild members. I'm wondering if it was a borrowed power, like part of Selene's plan to get Alderaan back up. And we do know that the moon has very strange properties within the Fairy Tail world in terms of magic. But she does say that she can still use magic to a degree. Like she's saying how she's talking about Elentir. She's like saying how they're out of time, and Elentir, something Elentir. Like they name drop Elentir a lot, but they don't get directly to what it is. It's just kind of like hype it up a little bit. I believe I know what Elentir is. I'm going to talk about that near the end of the chapter. But she mentions how she mentions how because she was inside, she was pretty much took over Toka's body for a while, that she could still use some of her magic, because they're talking about, like, instead saving Elentir, like, there's a lot of very interesting things, because one thing at first, when Toka wakes up, the White Witch mentions Elentir, Toka's like, Elentir, and then it's like, so you're also Elentir's, and then cut off. And then the White Witch is like, it's still it's no longer possible for her to save Elentir, and saying, like, if they ended up defeating Alderaan, then maybe they can, they can send them to Elentir. And at this time, I was like wondering, well, is Elentir a person? Because I did a short video just talking about like what Elentir could be, if it was a dragon, a god, a creature, a magic. But while the White Witch is saying how she was using Toka's body in order to save Elentir, but she realizes like that she's like talking about how, oh, well, because I was in your body, I can use your magic roll. And also, as another thing that I'll mention towards the end, is like she's saying how she wants to save Elentir, and if she's able to do that, she'll accept whatever punishment Toka will give. And again, that's important to what I want to talk about at the end. So she ends up like asking for some water, and we get a name of this type of magic that Toka uses. She calls it Aqua Era, and she just pretty much uses some water and makes a portal and just vanishes. She ends up vanishing, and we get peered over. We get Lucy, and Lucy's like trying to get some clothes. Obviously, this was like right after the events of the last chapter when they were all small, and you got like a funny part, like she's Natsu's like, oh, why don't you just use your just use your star dress, and she's like, oh yeah, that's an ability I have. She uses it, gets her Virgo dress, and then she's in her maid outfit. And after that point, you see all the main cast light up with some light, some ominous magic around them. Obviously the main cast, not like people that are kind of like adjacent, like Juvia or Gajul, but they all just up and vanish. They all just up and vanish, and they end up in this area where Lucy is naked. Lucy being naked is the first sign, because at the start I was like trying to figure out like, well, why was she naked? She was just wearing her clothes. But it's like, oh yeah, if they're in Edolas, they don't have magic because they had magic sucked out of Edolas by the end of the Edolas arc, and that means that Lucy's magic would have worn off, so she went back to being naked. So that was a nice tell, and I liked that they were able to work in sense from the last chapter into a tell into what's going on in this chapter. And Lucy, actually, like, Lucy's scene wasn't that, like, it wasn't really put that much as like a comedic or lewd scene. Like, the most you really see of her is like a slight bit of like side boob, nothing that's really erotic or anything kind of crazy. It's like Lucy gets joked, like she gets set up to do some like gags and some lewd scenes a lot, and she's a very well-rounded character, and to like her level of skill she brings to the team, because she's also very intelligent, she's very useful, but she also is able to do fan service and comedy for everybody. But after that point, they realize they can't use magic, and right then you have this little girl run up to Lucy, like asking if she's her mom. And then, like, there's some confusion, like, people are, like, not really sure. You can definitely tell, if you saw her, that she does look a bit like Lucy, and then that's when Edolas Lucy shows up. And I was wondering, like, while reading this, I was like, well, I wonder if Selene is going to have any connection to, like, what's going on, because of the fact that Edolas has so many moons. I'm wondering if that's going to possibly come into play at any time. I don't think so. Maybe that's just a coincidence. Nothing, like, crazy. To, put a note on that, put a bookmark on that question. But Edolas Lucy obviously shows up, and people are like, oh shit, we're in Edolas. Like, that explained a lot. There's another Lucy. We can't use magic. And then obviously, like, people are still at the same time like, holy shit, you have a kid. Like, yeah, for them it's been 9 years. For them it's been 2 years. So I don't really know how they would go about explaining, well, yeah, like, right after we got back, we went and did some, like, examine our guild, and then we got attacked by an enemy guild. It was after, essentially, Dark Wizard Jesus, who had to leave at one point because a giant apocalypse dragon showed up and blew up the island, and then we pretty much skipped 7 years in time. Like, there's like, I don't know how you really would otherwise, like, go about that in a way that people would kind of, like, have to process this in their mind. Like, so you were in essentially magic cryostasis. I guess magic stasis for 7 years. I mean, it'd be really weird to kind of like try and get somebody's head around that hasn't read the, you know, obviously as the viewer of the series, or like live in their world to kind of like have to fathom that. And especially actually in Edolas, like they didn't have a lot of crazy magic, so like stuff like that would still be bewildering to them. Because in Edolas, like they didn't have a lot of magic, and like all their stuff, their magic weapons for the most part were pretty simple. And, you know, some of them were pretty dangerous, obviously Nightwalker's Ten Commandment spear, as well as, you know, Dorna Anum. But they didn't have anything like, when you look at like Fairy Tail, they didn't have anything like Etherion or anything, or the Dragon Cry, or the Phoenix or dragons. They didn't have anything that was like, holy shit, you guys have like absurd stuff like this. For the most part, Edolas was at their level, but there wasn't anything that was well beyond them out there. But there's some nice conversation between the characters. We get back, we see the Edolas Fairy Tail Guild. Edolas Elfman looks a little bit like worse for the wear. He just looks like he's aged a bit more than the other guys. But I still think it's a little bit funny that Edolas, Jet, and Droy are like the strongest in their guild. Man, Edolas Jet looks... his design looks a little goofy with his hair like that. Man, like Edolas Droy, he's got a little bit of that, like, oh, he's a little bit of a sillier character, somewhat, but he's still strong. Edolas Jet just does not look very good. And then Edolas Mako just looks like he's somebody that like hangs out at Starbucks a lot. But after that point, like, you just get some explanations. You know, you're just kind of like having the characters kind of go over what happened. You had Edolas Lucy and Edolas Natsu get married, have kids. Same thing with their, you know, the Edolas counterparts to Juviet and Gray. You have like, surprisingly, you know, Gray is very embarrassed over this, as well as Lucy. Like, Gray is surprising, but obviously with Gray, it's because now he actually does want to be with. So this is something that'd be like a bit mind-boggling for him to kind of wrap his head around. I did really like that there was the note for Wendy of seeing Edolas Wendy. Obviously, Edolas Wendy is way bigger, and then just like the Wendy just absolutely not like quietly panicking stay for the fact that Edolas Wendy has those huge tits. I always like Wendy's like funny like giant boob jokes, because they're never anything that's that big. It's mostly just seeing Wendy's reaction that I really like. There's never like a time where it's relevant to like what's going on. There's never a time where it's like takes away from the story. Like it was like, oh, Wendy, and then like Wendy turns around and sees that stare. I just think it's funny. But it's always funny to see Wendy shaken up, just because she's just such a nice character. And to see her completely like rattled by that is just always amusing. And Happy doing his thing, being a bit of a troll, like, oh yeah, you guys haven't changed at all. It's like, well, no, they have children now. But there was the thing about Edolas Urza Nightwalker. Again, I'm curious to know what that is. I don't think it's gonna be anything. I don't think it's gonna be anything like crazy, like anything big plot related. I feel like it'll just be something to kind of like mess with Urza specifically. I don't know what it would be. I'm hoping that it's not bad. I don't want anything that would be bad for Edolas, for her. I don't want it to be like, oh yeah, she's, you know, because she lost her power, she became like a homeless drug addict or something. I don't want her to be like a junkie and she just is like a hobo. Kind of like if you read the, what was it, the City Heroes spinoff, like where the Fairy Tail Guild was like a police, and that, like, it was like working other characters in different roles, and Jose was a homeless man. Like it was like something like that. Or I don't want anything like that for Nightwalker. Like, we don't need Nightwalker to have like a big role. We don't need that much time to make her like, oh, we're gonna have a whole chapter where Urza goes and hangs out with Nightwalker. No. It's been set up that she exists. If they're gonna just see her, I'm hoping she's in a good state. I don't want anything bad. I'm really hoping that it's just, oh, it's something like maybe she's a nun, or she runs a school, kind of like what Anna did after Alvarez War. I don't know. That one I'm just kind of like, I'm slightly worried about, because it's just a really weird thing to bring up. But at the end of the chapter, we have the White Witch, and when she gets up, she's bringing up like, this isn't Elentir, which means Elentir is a place. Elentir isn't a being. Elentir is some form of realm. Whether it's an alternate reality, similar to how what Earthland and Edolas, which is a nice thing that it's like in there, because the fact that it like all three of them start with E, just as like, I don't know, I feel like that's just on purpose. Maybe it's coincidence. But the fact that she's clearly said it's a place. Now that's something to note. The fact that it's a place. She's bring up the fact she's the one, obviously she was trying to send them to Elentir, so I'm wondering if we'll go to Elentir after a couple chapters and find out whatever the White Witch's plot is before we get back to Selene. There's also the question of what's gonna happen during the time they're in Edolas, and if they go to Elentir, what's gonna happen while they're over there in Earthland? Is there gonna be like they're gonna get back and it's post Selene on like a rampage? Or doing her thing, because out of the characters, obviously the White Witch isn't going to be present, so we don't have to worry about her. But we have the Dragon Eaters doing their thing of Diablos, and we're going to have the Fairy Tail members that stayed behind, and we're going to have Selene. We don't know about Ignia, we don't know about Elentir or Viernes, but Selene is the one that we know is getting ready to be active. Ignia, like, I don't think Ignia would really get up to do much, because we know that his goals involve fighting Natsu, so I don't know why he would just, like, the most he would really do is go somewhere to try and, like, just cause havoc. He wouldn't have some grand plan. But after that point, she's, like, talking about how she can't use magic where there she's at, so she can't return to the original world. So I'm wondering when she says original world, if she's referring to Elentir, or if she's referring to Earthland. Now, let me talk about where I think this goes. There's a couple facts that we're going to have to look at. Hiramashima, so far, throughout 100 Years Quest, has made a lot of callbacks to older parts in the story, and is looping events in some relation to, stuff that happened much further back. And I thought we were going to get Galuna Island, because he mentioned on Twitter that he was going to, we were going to have some nostalgic characters returning. And when he said that, I was under the assumption it was going to have to do with Selene. So when it came to Selene, I was like, oh, nostalgic characters, Selene's the moon dragon goddess, it'll have to do with the moon. Oh, well, Galuna Island, not only is in the crescent moon shape, the stuff with moon drip, maybe it'll be that. I didn't consider that it was referring to the White Witch. Now, the White Witch, from what we're seeing, now we're in Edolas. I don't think we're in Edolas for no reason. I don't think we're in Edolas just to see alternative worlds versions of their kids and stuff. I think there's a purpose for it. And there's a couple things to note. One, the fact Elentir is another world, some form of realm. We gotta keep that in mind. Two, what the White Witch said earlier when she was talking to Toka, when she's like saying how she would accept any punishment from her, and when Toka is like, oh, you're also Elentir's, and then cut off. So it means she is in some way related to Elentir. So if this is a realm that she has to be somehow related to, then it has to be that she's from there. It has to be that she is from wherever this is, this realm. I don't think it's like a city or a kingdom or a country. I think it has to be some form of alternate world similar to what Edolas is. Now, when she says that she would accept any punishment from her, I want to connect that to what's going on right now. The fact they're in Edolas. Now, in Edolas, the things that we found out in that arc, probably the biggest thing in that arc was information about the Exceed. Because we got stuff in it, like we found out stuff about like Mistogon, but that was more towards Mistogon's specific character, whereas when it came to the Exceed, we found out about the Exceed in general. We found out about this race, we found about how they had been playing this, they'd been playing the kingdom and the people there and the humans there into believing that they were, pretty much gods, and that Shagot was using her power of clairvoyance to, like, pretty much trick them into thinking that she could kill people by saying that she would kill somebody that was, going to end up dying because she saw it in the future from a sickness or an accident, and made it kind of, like, manipulate it into thinking they were some form of higher beings. Now, that, plus the fact that they can use magic in Edolas, was, like, the fact that they could use magic in Edolas was never really addressed. It was never really a thing that was important, but it's something that we can look back on now, because that connects with Elentir, I believe, and Toka. Because another thing about Toka that we had from Carla was the fact that she says that she knew she remembers and knew all of the Exceed that came over from Edolas into Earthland, except Toka. So Toka is not from Edolas. Toka is from Elentir. But if she's from Elentir, that means that there are Exceed in Elentir. Now, that might mean that Elentir, or that the Exceed don't originally come from Edolas. Maybe they come from Elentir, and that's why they can, maybe that's why they can use magic. Now, the fact when she says that she would accept any punishment from Toka means that Toka is in some way of a higher position than her. Now, with the Exceed, both from their era magic when they have their wings, and the way that they've been described and seen in Edolas before, obviously the secret got out what they were doing, is that they were almost like angels. Now, you have these beings from essentially, potentially, rather, a whole different realm, that they could do something that is obviously rule-breaking to Edolas, and they had a power of clairvoyance, and they were depicted as like angels and gods and stuff. So that combined with what Toka said about being punished and stuff, or that White Witch said from Toka about being punished, makes me think that they are from this realm. And if you want to look at it, like obviously, like putting out punishment would be, like I said, something kind of like imagine an angel in like dealing out righteous justice or righteous judgment and stuff. So if Elentir is where they're from and they're depicted almost like angels over there, is Elentir the realm of gods in fairy tale? Because it's still a possibility that is going to be what introduces Ankh-Saram and potentially fairy tale's god pantheon. We don't know exactly that. Like there's no definitive like connection of it with Ankh-Saram, but I think that the fact that they're in Edolas means the Edolas content is going to be relevant somehow. I think they're gonna find out information of how of like the Exceeds, like how the Exceed got to there in the first place, and then that'll relate back to Elentir, and we'll find out that they somehow came over. Maybe that's how they got the anima portal in the first place, or maybe even just the idea of how the anima portal was made. Now, there's going to be obviously a big reveal. It's very clear, I think, the way that Elentir was constantly brought up at the start, but it kept getting cut off before I found out what it is originally. But we know it is a world, some form of realm that needs to be saved, and you have the White Witch from there. And on top of that, the White Witch doesn't have magic, but she can use magic from bodies that she takes over. So she has some strange ability that doesn't seem like something from any of the other worlds. Because if her magic was, oh, I can take over somebody's body and then I can either use their magic, or if if I separate from them, I could use their magic for a period of time, then that would make sense as to, oh, that's her magic. But if she can't use magic at all, what is the ability she has? How does she have an ability like that? But she says like she can't use magic or anything like that, but like, because she has only two things right now. We know she has the whiteout power, and we know she had an ability from Toka. Like, she seems to have something completely different. Maybe it is like what I said. That's her magic that she can do. But I think if she's from Elentir and she has this strange ability, then she has to have some form of connection to, some form of difference in ability, similar to how the Exceed are. The fact the Exceed could use magic while even in Edolas. So I'm very curious as to how this is really going to play out and just the overall idea, because this is a completely out of left field plot. I figured the White Witch was going to have something to do with kind of like some weird religious psychological thing, kind of like doing some weird vision of how like maybe things should be or something, kind of like Zaref's, but in a different direction. But it seems instead she's somehow trying to work into saving wherever world she's from. Because on top of that, like, if the Aqua Era spell that she used originated from Toka, and this means that Toka has this magic that can go between realms. Because it's not just a one-way from Earthland to Elentir. The White Witch didn't use it properly, and because of that, all these characters ended up in Edolas. So, the way that I really see it with this power, because if it's not just one way, or rather it's not just it's such a linear way between point A to point B, it seems to be going between realms. To me, that's also something that like would be a godly power. Like that's something that like, to me it would kind of seem like, oh yeah, some form of spell to freely travel between different realms and alternate universes and stuff just seems like something that would come from some form of god power, because the animal portal was something that had developed, and as far as we know, it only went Earthland and Edolas. Whereas I don't know if people that beat headphones, but with the Aqua era, it's seemingly completely different. It functions completely on another level than the animal portal. So there's a lot really to kind of unpack when it comes to this chapter, because this opposite. Stop it, head. Stop it. I don't know if that BB is going through, but not maybe the opposite, but it was more of a sandwich. The last chapter was like comedy and shipping stuff, and then at the very end, tail end was set up for this chapter. Whereas this chapter was like big important lore, like setup, and character driven things. Obviously stuff with ships and stuff, and seeing what's happened in Edolas and over the last 9 years, and then ends on big lore stuff as well with the White Witch. I'm really intrigued on what the White Witch brings to the story. Once my music stopped, I gotta play it a little finish. I'm really interested in seeing what the White Witch does for expanding the story, because if we're getting an entirely different realm, and like I said, if it's true and Elentir is like where the gods are, because Elentir is also in the name, is named assuming that the naming from it, similar to how like Ankh-Saram is like two different, like it's like Ankh, which is like Egyptian for life, and then I think it's Indonesian, or like Saram is like horror, like terror. So his name, like the idea like combined, it means like life of fear or something, life of terror, I think actually. And then Elentir, like Ellen, I think it was like light shining. Obviously that sounds like it has something to do with gods, and then Tyr was like a god of knowledge or something. So that just seems like some form of godly being, like all-knowing, radiant, and above all other things. And then if they have the Exceed, who are like seemingly, assuming that they're at least Toka, angelic beings, it would make sense of why this is some form of god pantheon, and as well as it could introduce Ankh-Saram in any other gods. Because like with all this stuff in Fairy Tail, like we have the White Witch, we have Diablos, we have we have the dragon gods, whatever El of Saria potentially could be, or any other big characters that might come out of hiding or waiting from the fact that Zeref and Actologia are no longer there. From what we know, the end game, if there was ever going to be like Hiromishima's like, this is the final bad guy before doing either ending Fairy Tail or doing a next generation thing, Ankh-Saram is the logical end villain. Ankh-Saram is the logical end protagonist of the series if Hiroshima ever wanted to have that done. So I'm really interested to see where this goes and what exactly this kind of all plays out to be, because there's a lot of stuff that really this can lead to. There's a lot of like additional like world building in the large scale expanse of Fairy Tail, as well as setting up for much larger threats and enemies and whatnot. Because after the Dragon Gods, like, is Natsu going to have anyone else to fight? Is there going to be something bigger? Because the thing about Ankh-Saram also is, like, you can defeat the Dragon Gods, you can defeat Diablos, whatever Elisari is doing, if Elisari ends up becoming an antagonist. But Ankh-Saram could easily create another Zeref. Ankh-Saram could easily create another Zeref. As long as Ankh-Saram has the capability of just cursing somebody with immortality, death radiation, like mind twisting, like power, and absolute like this immortality curse, and just turns them into like walking death, there's always that threat that he can make another person like Zeref. Maybe they don't end up as powerful as Zeref, because one of the things about Zeref was the fact that he was so intelligent when it came to magic, and he just was a prodigy at understanding and utilizing magic. But as a level of danger in general, or what if he ended up cursing someone like Natsu, and you had an immortal dragon slayer, and then all the other stuff on top of it, or ended up cursing one of the dragon gods, or any powerful up and coming character, anyone with high potential. I mean, like in all honesty, any character cursed by it, because the curse is going to keep them immortal, and the power that they're going to be setting off is from Ankh Saram. It's not like relevant to their level. It's like the curse, the death radiating ability of the curse is from a god. So, like, even if it's on somebody who's, like, a nobody, it's still, you're exuding, like, a god-level curse of death onto people. So, I'm very, very hyped to see where this goes. We're probably going to get a couple chapters in Edolas, like I said. Maybe we'll find out. Like, I just see, like, there's no way that they're just in Edolas for the sake of seeing these old characters for nostalgia and ships. I think it's going to lead into information that is important to the plot for the White Witch. Because like I said, the stuff with the Exceed, I think, connect too many things, and obviously the stuff we got this chapter with Toka is questionable. Like the fact that she's like, oh, you can punish me or anything, like it seems they're both from Elentir or related to Elentir in some way. The fact that we know that Toka from Carla is not from Edolas. She didn't come from Edolas when they brought over all the Exceed from when the Anima Portal went in reverse. So she has to be from Elentir. The only other option would be that she is an Exceed that, came over when all of those eggs were originally sent over, when they were trying to get them all out before what Shagot thought was the end of Edolas, and they're all going to die. But that wouldn't explain like why she would know anything about Elentir. So I think she's from Elentir, and I think that'll end up explaining why do Exceed have this ability with Arrow? Why can they use magic in a world where you're not, like, people normally can't use magic? Why are their wings like angelic looking? Why why does she know these things? Why does she have a magic that can transport them between realms? Again, it's a lot of big stuff that's coming up. I got a lot of hype for what's going up. This started out just kind of like going into this, like people were excited about ships. Obviously, I like seeing Nasha. I like her design. She's cute. I think it will lead to some interesting character interactions between Natsu and Lucio later on. But I am big hype on this Elentir stuff. The Elentir stuff is really interesting to me, and I've got my fingers crossed that it could lead into Ankh Saram, because I really want to know about Ankh Saram, because he is, like I said, the biggest named character in the series in terms of, like, if you looked at all the characters and you kind of like looked at them at like a level, and you're like, okay, Zeref's here, okay, who's above him, Dragon Gods, Actor Look and stuff. The top of the Fairy Tail universe is Ankh Saram, or at least of the selected one. If you want to like count heroes, obviously it's Mashimir, but that's kind of like its own thing within Hiromishima's giant expansive multiverse. But just in selectively the Fairy Tail storyline, Ankh Saram is the biggest being. So yeah, at least that we know of. I would like Ankh Saram to be the big one, because like when Natsu was talking about, like, I think that would also do really well at relating back to Natsu when he had Wolfen turned to Zeref, and he felt bad about Zeref suffering from that curse. It would make sense of why he would want to go after Ankh Saram at some point, because the fact that he, Zeref suffered because of Ankh Saram. All the bad stuff that Zeref did was because of Ankh Saram. It all really rooted out of and was caused by Ankh Saram. It is entirely his fault. Zeref wasn't innocent entirely, but if Ankh Saram just never cursed him, Zeref would have just done more experimenting and maybe done something he shouldn't have. But all the stuff that really happened that was bad throughout the story, like all the people that died because of the demons of Zeref and everything, all the Aetherius, everything that really rooted out of Ankh Saram. The only stuff that isn't like relayed back to him is like stuff between the dragons, because all their stuff was kind of caused by Irene making Acnologia. Not entirely, because the dragons had their own fights, and that led to Irene creating Dragon Slayer magic, but for the most part, Ankh Saram is like the biggest. Ankh Saram is rooted to the biggest kind of events in Fairy Tail. Zeref, more because he's way more directly kind of close to the events that went into, like, you know, the main cast storyline, the creation of the guild and stuff, but none of that could have happened without Ong-Saram, and Ong-Saram still exists, and Ong-Saram could easily make another Seraph. So, we'll see. This was a long, much longer than I thought. We're at like 40 minutes just because I really wanted to go into this stuff. There's a ton of potential to come out of this. But anyway, other than that though, comment below, thumbs up the video, prefer the like button and the subscribe button, check out my other videos, tell me your opinions on what this means. Like, anybody who made it to the end, what do you think about, like, all the things that I believe, like, are connected together between, you know, the Exceed, Toka, Elentir, the White Witch, Ong-Saram, and all this stuff that could just open up, like, a big level to Fairy Tail that we didn't really know was coming in 100 Years Quest. Anyway, like I said, other than that, thanks everyone who's already subscribed. Thank you all for listening. Bye.